Hopefully. How are you? I promise you this is an actual event tonight. We're not just having a dance party. How are you? So we'll be starting in about 4 minutes. So we're just letting a couple of late people attend who are jumping in. But how are things going on your end?
So, how are you this evening? Just finishing the last conference call.
Okay. I was going to say, I thought we liked each other. We've had good conversations, I swear.
Yeah, but there's no tea coming through the computer right now, so it's comfortable.
Look, as soon as the technology comes, Daryl and Rachel will vouch. I will pay for it. Granted, I don't know if Federation will comp that, but, it would be nice.
Minor technicalities.
Minor technicalities. But how are things going on your end, my friend? How busy is it this time of year?
Crazy.
Yeah.
Work is crazy, school's crazy, people are crazy. You understand. No different than anywhere else.
What do you do for work?
I run Engwood Health's Physician Network. About 146 offices in 2 states. Keeps me busy some days.
Wow.
Sounds like it keeps you busy most days. And while you sleep.
Pretty much while I sleep. Yeah, exactly. Still recovering from last night's board meeting.
Was it a tough one?
People sometimes have the wrong objectives. Literally the most controversial thing was someone arguing over that we don't do enough Kiddushim, and when we explained in the last 2 months we've done 25 because multiple minyanim over Shabbos. Yeah. Then it went, oh well, I don't like your menu at the Kiddush. It's like a board should really not be discussing what the menu at Kiddush is. If this is like Halavai, that should be the only issue we have. And it's like, no, unfortunately, there's some generations who only have one thought process of what they're actually looking for, and they don't care about anything else. It's so much fun.
One of the reasons I left my pulpit was because I got tired of at board meetings debating whether we're going to have tuna fish or egg salad at Kiddush when there were people starving 5 miles down the road.
You got the menu?
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
I think this person wouldn't get that.
He has menu?
Yep, he's the one who has the minion. But Mia, we're gonna start the meeting soon, okay? Can you say good night to the nice people?
No, stay.
Good night, Mia.
Don't make Abba put you to bed. Don't let Abba put you to bed, Mia. Don't do it.
Mia, say good night.
Fight the power, girl.
See, and I thought we were getting along so well.
This is going so good until then. Yeah.
Mia, I have to be on this meeting.
Yeah,
Okay? I love you very much. I'll be up as soon as I can. Okay, I love you very much, sweetheart. Thank you.
Oh, we're about to. Hi. It ripped.
All right. So we'll start in 1 minute. So thank you everyone for coming this evening. All right, I think we're good to get started. And if others jump in, then obviously they'll catch up. But hi. So it's good to see everyone here. For anyone who doesn't know, my name is Dustin Hausner. I am the manager of the Synagogue Leadership Initiative for Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. It's so great to have you all here this evening. So I got permission not to do my 20-minute introduction that I was going to do of our guest speaker, which is greatly appreciated. But I'm very pleased that tonight, not only do we have someone who is returning to speak to our group because he just has a wealth of knowledge and information, but just as a fun reminder, he is also one of the individuals one of our professional consultants that we are offering for the synagogues, no charge at all, for consultation services. And we have that information through our e-blast, as well as other information that we'll put up on the screen at the end. So Rabbi Paskin has been gracious enough to work with us, and he has a number of different offerings for the synagogues that apply for his specific consultations. Again, we're more than happy to provide more information at the end, as well as we've sent several e-blasts. The deadline is, of course, this upcoming Monday, December 19th at the end of the day. So without further ado and without further plugging, I would like to pass this over to our wonderful guest speaker, Rabbi David Paskin. So,
Hey, Dustin. Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you guys all for taking a little bit of time to be here tonight. So I have a bunch of stuff that I wanted to share with you, but I also want to make sure that I'm not talking at you. So I'd actually like to start just by asking you to help me out with something. So at the bottom of your Zoom screens, you should have a few different reaction buttons. There's a little reaction thing. And so what I'd like to ask you to do is you should see 7 options: clapping hands, thumbs up, a heart, laughing face with tears, a surprised face, and a party popper. And then there's a big button for raise hand. And there may be some other emojis. So I wanted to just ask you to choose one of these 3 emojis. If you have lots of young leaders that are engaged in your community, put up the clapping hands. If you have a few young leaders, but you want more, choose the thumbs up. And if you don't really have many young leaders at all, choose the surprised face. And if you don't see those reactions, Vel, you can put one of those emojis in the chat also. All right, so I see we have some, not a ton, and I've got a heart. Cheryl, what does the heart mean?
I think that's the wrong thing. I thought you said if there's some.
It's not the wrong thing. It's perfect. The heart is perfect. I love it. All right. So we all have a few, but we'd all like more. That's what I'm hearing. Okay. So I titled today TzimTzum, which means, as you know, it's this mystical creation myth of the universe. And it means sort of stepping back to allow for there to be an other or an else, as in something or someone else. And what I'd like to argue with you tonight is that this stepping back is exactly what's needed in Jewish organizations as we want to recreate ourselves for the next generation. So I want to talk today with you about why engaging new voices and new ideas is so important, why these voices and ideas seem to be missing from our communities, how we can make room for them, and what I think they will add. And just a caveat, new voices and new ideas are not always going to come from the young members of our communities. I'm ancient, and all I do is offer new ideas. So, but for our time today, I want us to think about that younger generation and how we can tap into this bottomless well of new ideas. And I think that a lot of the ideas that we talk about will relate to engaging that community will also apply to other constituencies as well. So let's talk for a moment about the bad rap that young people have. They don't work hard enough. They seem to want it all now. They have a hard time distinguishing between work and play. They have an entitlement attitude. What on earth happened to grammar, spelling, and etiquette? Well, there are slackers out there. Let's not kid ourselves. But then again, I'm over 50 and I haven't gotten it all together. So our focus is on those young folks who really have tremendous gifts to bring to our organizations, the majority of them. And let's talk a little bit about some of those gifts. So young leaders bring enthusiasm and optimism to their work. They just don't have the weight of the world on their shoulders yet. And often the problems of life haven't surfaced in the way that they do for those of us in our 40s and beyond. They also understand generation trends. Younger leaders grew up in a culture that we didn't. Having their voice around the table gives me a much better sense of what resonates and what doesn't. If you want to connect with the emerging generation, you got to have the emerging generation around your table. It's simply irreplaceable. Third is that they challenge assumptions because they're trying to figure out how the world works. They ask really good questions and they challenge assumptions. They haven't made peace with the status quo, and some of the best insights and solutions for problems are going to come from the next generation of leaders, precisely because they see things differently. 4, they learn fast. a 23-year-old can go from good to great in a few years, and lots of them are motivated to do just that. They're technologically savvy. Now, I'm tech savvy and even a bit tech obsessed, but you put me around an 18-year-old or a 25-year-old, and I'm like the guy who can't figure out how to set the clock on the VCR. Somehow they're capable of learning things faster than us older folks were. And they were raised in a fast-moving world, and it shows. So let's leverage that. Sixth, they are our succession plan. Senior leaders often like to run with their peers, and I get that. I do too. And we need wisdom and maturity. But if we're not stacking our team with leaders 10, 20, in some cases 30 years younger than us, then we're not positioning our organization for future relevance or success. 7, they're fun to work with, and they love fun. And our synagogues and our institutions should not be boring organizations. They're passionate about their mission. They don't want their work to just be work. And if we as leaders of our Jewish communities, if we're clear about our why, chances are that our young leaders will own our mission, our vision, and values deeply. They want to make a difference in the world, and they're passionate promoters of causes that they believe in, which can turn out to be great for our organizations. So we know why we want these young leaders. Let's talk a little bit about why they aren't engaging the way that we want them to. So in 2018, a consortium of Jewish philanthropies commissioned Atlantic 57 to conduct a rigorous study of Jewish young adults across the United States. And this study was released right before the pandemic in 2020. So bear that in mind. A lot has changed since then, but here's a little bit of what we learned from that study. Because younger Jews don't always engage the way we have for decades, it's easy to dismiss them as not caring and not connected. But by and large, young Jews see their Judaism as a serious influence on their lives and how they see the world. The question is, how are they connecting, and what place do they want Judaism to have in their lives? Now, the group in this study mirrors a broader trend. More and more Americans have shied away from organized religion, opting for new forms of community and meaning. I see you, by the way. Give me 1 second, and I'll jump back over to you. Is that okay? Is that cool? Awesome. So I just want to share with you while we're on this slide. I just want to share with you this one slide. So basically, spirituality means more to survey respondents than religion did. 27% say that spirituality is very important to them. 19% who say the same about religion. 4 in 10 report finding both religion and spirituality important. Interesting. But the same ratio reports finding both of them unimportant. And one of the participants in this study said, I feel like I get much more from yoga than I do from my Jewish religion right now. Did you want to jump in, Moishe? Please.
So just a quick question. When we're saying younger, how are we defining this? What generation are they looking at?
Yeah, so this particular study was focused on primarily like post-college. There's actually a whole part of the study that talks about the demographic, but this is just post-college. So we're talking 21-ish, maybe 22, up until before early 30s.
Thank you.
Okay, absolutely. All right, so there's also a significant percentage of these young Jews who want to be more knowledgeable and engaged, but they aren't, and they feel badly about that. Can we take that in for 1 second? This is beautiful Jewish guilt, that a good portion of these folks really want to be engaged and knowledgeable, and because they're not, they feel guilty about that. So the question is, what's keeping them from that learning and that engagement? How do we bridge that divide? So I would argue that the first step is to understand what young Jews are engaged with. What do they support? So I don't know about your communities, but the pitch that most Jewish organizations, the pitch that my synagogue makes is come support our community, help build our community. Well, if we look at where young Jews have spent their time and their dollars, community building is really low on the list. I don't know if you can see it down here. I'll actually bring this guy over here. It's way down here. 17% say that community building is important to them. So what is more important? Values like caring for animals, family, healthcare, the environment. These are the things that are at the top of the list. Now, what would it look like if we reorganized our communities around values that young Jews feel passionate about instead of supporting the community for the community's sake? So, in addition to why young Jews connect and engage, we also have to ask how they want to connect and engage. And this is not going to come as a surprise to any of you, I think, but in focus groups, participants said that they are more drawn toward informal gatherings, right? They do not like to associate, or rather, they don't associate Jewish engagement with those casual gatherings. So what they prefer, gathering around shared interests, is not, but in informal ways, is not what they have in their mind about Jewish engagement. When we're asked about what does Jewish activities look like, what they say is ritual-oriented activities, going to shul. What they're looking for, at least according to one of the respondents, is just getting together to do something. Food, bowling, going to friends to hang out, watch TzimTzum together. Jewish-themed events, maybe, in which Jews and non-Jews alike gather over homemade food. Some of the young adults who were asked this were asked specifically, what does Judaism, what does Jewish community rather mean to you? How would you define it? And the words that they came up with were synagogue, temple, or Torah, all of which many of them have an emotional detachment from. So for a lot of these younger folks, connectedness to Jewish life doesn't arise out of formal institutions like synagogues. Their connectedness is tied to cultural customs and relationships they have with others. Most often, it's family members. So the question is, how do we take what we know about young leaders and make room for it in our organizations? What kind of TzimTzum, withdrawal, or making space for do we need to do? I want to argue that for starters, we kind of have to acknowledge that we're the problem. There's a wonderful pastor. Whoops, let me put that back up for you. There's a wonderful pastor named Larry Osborne who wrote the book Sticky Teams. And he made the observation that on high school and college campuses, it seems that freshmen always get smaller. As we age, each year's crop of incoming students seems less impressive than the class before, right? Oh, when we were, when I was a freshman, if that's true, of just 4 years on the campus, think about the long arc of adult life. So Osborne writes about the church. He says that seniors never graduate, at least not until they have become literal seniors and start passing away. They hog the leadership table, shutting out the next generation. It's one of the main reasons that most churches stop growing and lose their evangelistic touch and their cultural relevance around the 20-year mark. And he explains that leadership is a zero-sum game. One person's emerging influence is always another person's waning influence. That's why making room for young leaders is a really hard sell, especially to those who already have a seat at the table. Let me just pause for a moment and ask you, does that idea, having longtime leaders, maybe longtime congregants or members of your community or the federation, wherever, do you find that they have a hard time creating space for young leaders and giving up on ideas? Yeah, Dustin, please. Don't raise your hand. We're a small enough group that you all can just jump in.
So I had an experience that I was on a board and it was a very filled up board. It was like maybe 30 people. Like it was a just very big board. And it became very clear after I was asked and agreed to do it that it was really 5 people that ran the whole show. And when you know, tried to do different things, it was more of like a pat on the back than, you know, trying to train you or trying to show that, you know, you're going to be the next stop. It felt more symbolic than anything else. So, and I've also been on several boards where I am I'm the associate young person on the board. So I've been there, done that many times. I still do it today. It's gotten a little better, but it's always fun when you have older members telling you what's wrong with your generation and they don't ask the person who's actually part of the generation what their thoughts on it are, which I'm sure this is not new for some of the people in the room. So
I've 100% felt it. I mean, I'm a little bit younger than Dustin, and I've tried to be on boards. I worked at a synagogue and tried to like help explain why younger people should be on the board as opposed to the people that have always done it or give a lot of money, and so their opinion matters more. I put that in quotes, obviously, and have been told that my opinion wasn't cared for.
That pat on the head that you described, Dustin, I don't think we realize how powerful that is in a negative way, right? I don't think that sense that, oh, you're the kids, as opposed to you are the future leaders, or maybe even some of the current leaders, or your ideas have value. As an old person, I understand how difficult it is to hear those new voices and to not be dismissive, because what do they know? They haven't been here. They don't know the history of this organization, this institution. They don't understand the culture, or they don't have a deep understanding of the halacha if we're in an Orthodox environment, right? What do they know? We have to stop patting them on the head and start taking them seriously. We have to be willing to allow others to influence and direct the course of our organizations. And in order to do that, I would argue, we also need to create structures that honor the longtime service of some of our more senior leaders. I don't believe that every past president needs to have a seat on the board of directors. I do believe that they all need to be honored for their service. Maybe in a president's council or a president's circle, they need to feel like they are still relevant and still able to contribute. And we can do that without them being on the front lines of the leadership of the temple. Make sense? All right.
Yes, but
Yes, but I love buts. Go ahead.
as a past president of my synagogue, you know, we're given a seat on the board for life. I mean, most of the time the past presidents don't show up, but if I were to be kicked off, I would have a hard time because I really gave my blood, sweat, and tears for those years that I was president. And so it's really hard to say, okay, thank you for what you did, but like, goodbye.
Yes,
So that's hard.
You're right. It is hard, and I would look. My job throughout all of these sessions is to push back basically on what everyone says. So take everything that I'm saying as it's meant to be, as a conegdo, right? As I'm intentionally being oppositional to push us, but I wonder, what does it look like to the 25-year-old, the 27-year-old who could have been out with their friends at the bar to show up to a board meeting to know that all the past presidents are part of the board, but none of them bother to show up? What does that tell them about how important this pursuit is?
Right. It seems like it's not that important.
Why would no? They don't. They're a past president. They're not even showing up. What do I care?
Right.
So but you're right. You're right. There are trade-offs, and that's why I really, it's so important to mention that we have to honor our past leaders and our current leaders who have been serving for a long time. I am not suggesting that we get rid of all of these senior leaders with whippersnappers, but we have to make space for them. And what the pastor said up above is that leadership, it is a zero-sum game to a certain extent. The more chefs you have in the kitchen, the more messy the kitchen's going to get. At a certain point, we have to decide who's going to really own the leadership of our community.
So,
Now,
let me challenge that for a second.
please.
So again, nothing against older presidents. I mean, we're pretty good. Now we've done a lot over the last couple of years to right size our board. Now, at one point we had a 35-person board, which for a 400 family congregation is too large. We're down to 22, and we'll hopefully be down to 20 soon enough. No, it's just also hard kicking people off the board, and I can tell you that
It is.
rewriting a constitution and doing some math, but that's a different story. Our board composition, just age-wise, there's one person who's in their 60s. There are two people in their early 50s, and everyone else is 30s and 40s, skewing towards 30s. I mean, we've done a good job trying to bring in younger people. It's very hard to get younger people to join the board or show up to meetings or do anything. And what we're seeing is not as much, the older people not getting there, saying what's going on. More the younger people have great ideas, but don't actually want to articulate, don't want to do any of the ideas. They want to articulate complaints, but don't actually want to do anything about it, just criticize anything else. And even when we've gone to a couple of them saying, we'll hand you the committee, it's all yours, you can do it your way. There's no desire, because I don't know if they actually understand what a board position is. I mean, I start every year on my board handing out, there's a pamphlet from New York State that explains what a board member is. It's not a perfect pamphlet, but like, how many people are on a board who don't even know what that means? No, it means more than showing up to a meeting for a couple hours a month and no fetching.
Right. And if I may, how many of those young folks even care what a board is?
They
I
don't.
wonder if they learned what a board was in a professional development kind of style, obviously not a meeting like a workshop or something, but I wonder if they need to like have their hand held.
Well, no, but what I'm suggesting is, look, what I'm going to suggest big picture here is that boards may not be the leadership style that we should be focusing on. Boards worked in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And then look, my fundamental argument, you can all go home after I say this, because this is my fundamental argument. Okay. My fundamental argument is that think about shopping. Think about communication, think about spending money, think about transportation. Do you do any of those things the way you did 30 years ago? Zero. You know, the one thing that we do exactly the same way we did 30 years ago? Synagogue. That right there tells me that something is broken, and that fiddling around the edges, changing the brochure that we give to young folks when they join our board, that is not going to address the fundamental root challenges, which is that we have to ask ourselves if a board and if a constitution and if Robert's Rules of Order make sense. And I'm not saying they don't. I'm saying we have to ask the questions. And we won't be able, I don't think, to really ask those questions in meaningful, thoughtful ways until we have mixed and diverse age groups in our on our boards with diversity of thought, right? This mix is going to bring different strengths and perspectives. These young folks are driven, passionate, tech savvy. They're going to bring fresh perspectives, whereas the older teammates will bring all that social capital, the connections. They're more grounded. They have crystallized intelligence. They can formulate overarching strategies. So they're both going to, you're right. The young folks, they're going to complain. And by the way, I want to get into why I think they're complaining and then why I think they're not doing anything about those complaints, because I think there's a reason for that.
Can I interject 1 second?
Please, of
Because
course.
I don't think complaining is a young person thing. I think it's a human thing. I mean, we're in the process also of revamping our board. And for years, it was, we didn't have, we're a small Orthodox community in Paramus. We're about 85 families. And in the past 2 years, we've had a huge number, and by huge, I mean like 20 families of younger families move in, which has been amazing. That being said, people complained before they got here and people continue to complain. And we did the same thing you suggested, which is, you know what, we tell the people complaining, you're absolutely right. Here's the committee, run with it. And then of course, nobody does anything. So this issue of people just, complaining for the sake of complaining, but actually not wanting any responsibility is not age related. I just think it's human being related. Until we figure out how to solve that,
Well, you're absolutely right. You're 100%. Thank you so much for sharing that. Here's where I think it bugs us a little bit more when the young people do it, because they're just coming in. They don't know anything. They don't have a history necessarily in our community. How dare you just walk in and just start kvetching about what we're doing? Whereas the old people, you could say, oh, they have history, they remember when. I'm not suggesting that kvetching is okay. And you're right, everyone does it. I think sometimes it's harder to swallow when the young folks who don't have histories in the communities or don't know the cultures of the communities as well come in and not only start the complaining, but then, as you said, don't actually follow up with it.
Let me, just out of curiosity, and I don't want to go too off track, but Moshe, in your particular case, are the 20, 30-year-olds, are they people who have been on different boards, different types of things like that? Or is this real? The reason I asked that question is, one, to agree with an earlier point where, I was on boards when I was in high school and, college, and I can tell you, I definitely was very complain, let them know what they should be doing right, thinking that, that was, and they fix it, they do it, things like that. Why make the young person do all the things that you don't want to do? I mean, there's definitely, I think, a feeling when you get someone, especially if they haven't had that board experience, of that type of philosophy behind it, that I think could be part of it. And the second thing, and this is, I think, more of a universal, not specifically with synagogues, though I've been on part of many nonprofit boards, is sometimes there's no real training for the new people. Is you put them on the board, and then there's kind of this, everyone has their own bias of what it means having the young person on the board, and there's no real training on, okay, these are the committees, these are what we've done in the past, this is what we could do in the future. I mean, it takes time, but I would say part of the challenge that I found when I was younger, and I find with many boards I'm on now, is people get on, there's no real enrollment on how to do it. And then half the time, I would say there are older members of the board who roll their eyes because they're asking things that they've all gone over for whatever many generations they've been on the board. So it becomes this, animosity for no reason. So those would just be the two questions I had, because it sounded like that could be part of it potentially.
So,
or it could be totally wrong. And
no. Here's what I'm struggling with, Dustin. I'm struggling with the language that we're all using, because the language that we're all using is the same language. It's committees, it's board meetings, and it seems to me that what we are perpetually trying to do in synagogues is take a bunch of square pegs, those are our new folks, the people that haven't joined yet, or the young leaders, and shove them into our round holes, instead of letting them carve out their own square holes. And what I mean by that is, and again, it goes back to we are the only thing that has not changed in 30 years. Why is it that we need to train young people in how to integrate into our existing boards, the same boards that have been around forever with the same rules and the same structures, instead of saying to them, let's craft a leadership team together? What would that look like? What would that leadership team look like? As far as the complaining goes, to me, that's the Amazonification of the fact that we can all leave scathing reviews on Amazon products without any recourse. No one can yell at us about that. We all have become excellent at kvetching everywhere. So it doesn't surprise me that people are doing that even more today. But I would also argue that it comes down to, do they feel a sense of ownership? Do they feel like this is something of theirs? Or are we inviting them into something of ours? Go ahead, please.
Sorry, but let me challenge that. So again, because you keep saying maybe the board is not the right thing. So if you look at a show, obviously your board is just one piece of a show leadership thing. And again, obviously different shows work differently. So I'll just use the model that I'm used to in probably the 10 different places I've been in. No, not because I don't like shows, because I moved. as I joke, I want to get kicked out of one shul that I'll admit to. So no, we have lots of young people who are Gabayim of Minyanim. Again, we also have some older people because like the 845 minyan is always going to have an older Gabbai just because the young people are at work. The 845 is mostly retirees, no. But no, we have young Gabayim, no, they're willing to step up, run things like that. Again, no, begrudgingly, not doing any extra work more than they have to, but you can get them to do that. You can find something like a kids Purim program where you can find a couple of people who are interested for whatever age bracket their kids are in, and they're willing to help run that event, but forgetting it's a shul-wide event for everyone from people with young kids, no kids, or married and no older kids, hyper-focused. A board's job, if you think of what a board's actual job is, the board's job is fiduciary responsibility and mission and vision. All the other things that happen at boards are really personal opinion as well as professional opinion, waste of time. It's okay to have them there, but that's not the purpose of the board. The board is fiduciary responsibility. And what I've seen, I've been a board member for 15 years at my shul, and I've been on several boards before this, is the young, and again, I hate to say the younger generation because I don't think I'm that old, but the younger generation is not necessarily contributing the financial resource same way the older generation is, and I know what I could contribute 10 years ago versus I contribute today, are also the most vocal on how that resource should be done. The people who Baruch Hashem, have lots of money and are able to contribute or help us with endowments or bigger programs are very quiet in the background. They'll just go, hey, here's 10,000 towards a speaker series, here's 5,000 towards a capital project. It's the ones who aren't contributing anything, like the Kiddush example I gave before we started. The person who fetched at a board meeting about Kiddush menu, who's been a member for 5 years, first year as a board member, has never once in 5 years sponsored a Kiddush. And realize our Kiddush sponsorships are like $36 or $18. I mean, this isn't a barrier to entry. Some chastar, when you try to get everyone to participate, you get 70, 80 sponsors didn't contribute $18. And I think where the disconnect is the people who sponsor, even the non-board members who know what's going on. Because again, we do have an annual meeting and we get 100 people to show up to the annual meeting. It's scary that 100 people want to come to fetch. But lots of the questions are, the people making some of these decisions aren't giving sweat equity or real equity. Again, I'm all for someone who gives either way. I have no problem if someone can't afford. I know we have people on FAC, like every shul, they contribute lots to the shul. I mean, some of our best volunteers and they aren't doing it a one for one, but like people have said, I know I can't afford XYZ, or I know I can only afford a minimal amount for the dinner. Can I help do XYZ? Right. And it's a beautiful thing, but I think the difference is not quite not putting A plus B together in the head.
Look, the person who's complaining about Kiddush should not be in a position of leadership, period. Right? There are people, just because you're young doesn't mean that you're going to be a great leader. Just because you have an opinion doesn't mean that you should necessarily get to share it in the loudest voice possible. So there are going to be a whole bunch of people that I think are probably not built for leadership. But I want to focus, Moshe, on, you talked about the job of the board, and you mentioned mission and vision. So can I just ask, out of how many of us are on here? Like 6 of us. How many of you know your organization's mission statement? Dustin, what's yours?
Which organization?
Pick one, anyone. Whichever one you want. Do you know it?
From what I can recall from memory, I'm on the board of local NAACP. Their mission statement is, besides the advancement of colored people, it's for the equality, equity, and freedom and justice for all its membership and those who seek the benefits of the freedoms of the country that has been promised.
Very nice.
Something along those lines.
Very nice. Anyone else know theirs?
So we're actually revamping ours, but it's meaningless because nobody ever pays attention to it.
Okay. So I don't know Mike Scholl's mission statement, but I don't know our vision statement, but our mission statement is very, very simple. It's nurturing fuller Jewish lives. That's our mission
Nurturing
statement.
what?
Nurturing fuller Jewish lives.
Their consultant didn't get paid by the word.
Right. And every program we do, every decision we make is guided by that statement. Is what we're about to do going to help us nurture fuller Jewish lives? Moshe, do you know your Shoals?
Yep.
What is it?
To promote the education, religiosity, youth, and companionship of our membership.
Beautiful.
Written a little bit nicer than that, but yeah.
Okay. All right.
We
So,
actually, the Federation helped us write ours. Thank you, Federation.
oh, that's great. That's awesome. I mean, I think that the reason that's so important, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that about boards. When boards are at their best, they are focusing on mission and vision and fiduciary responsibility, of course. But remember that young folks, remember what at that chart of what they gave and to where they gave. Young folks are keen on giving to vision-driven causes, things that are going to change the world. When it comes to help us build our community, not so much. So if your community has a vision or a mission that young folks can latch onto, that immediately puts you a step ahead. If instead it's just about, I'll never forget, we were doing a missioning project at my old shul up in Massachusetts, just 25 years ago. And we were debating what should be in the mission statement. And one of the older folks who I loved, her name was Phyllis, said something to the effect of, ensure the financial future of the community. And my immediate reaction was, that's not vision or mission, that's necessity. If we don't have financial security, we're not going to be here, and vision and mission doesn't matter. That needs to be a given. I want to think bigger. How are we going to change the world? It gets back to the tuna fish and the poor people, right? How I've got in board meeting people arguing about tuna fish or egg salad when there are poor people down the road. I guarantee you take a young person, you put them in a board meeting where they're arguing about tuna fish or egg salad, as Moshe was saying about the Kiddush, they're going to have no interest. They're going to have no interest whatsoever. We're going to come back to, why do I think they're not doing anything about it in a second? Okay. No, you know what? Let's not wait. Let's just do it. No, we're going to wait. We're going to wait because I want to, it's part of a bigger picture, All right. Let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen. Let's say we find the magic pill, right? And we get these young people and they come in, we're somehow able to grab them. We're somehow able to inspire them to be a part of our community. So what's going to happen? What's going to change? Well, number one, young adults, they're innovators. There is no compulsion to defend the way it's always been done, and they don't have any turf to protect. So this idea of this is the way we've always done it is just not going to fly. No young person cares about this is the way we've always done it. And that statement, this is the way we've always done it, I don't mean to dismiss that, because to a lot of folks, that's actually a very powerful statement. They have history with an experience. They have memories with that experience. But nonetheless, because those young folks don't necessarily share that strong attachment to the processes, the rules, the formalities that have ruled the day, this is something we're going to have to give up on, because young adults fundamentally are receptive to change. They have the courage to make difficult changes. They know that if there's no pain, there's not going to be any gain. If you just look at some of the brilliant young leaders on the Forbes 30 under 30 list every single year, these are the folks that find solutions and elevate pain points. They elevate pain points and find solutions to them.
What does elevate pain points mean? Like tachlis, does that mean?
Like tachlis, like it's gonna hurt. These changes, the things that we're doing, they're gonna hurt a little bit. In the long term, they're necessary and they're important and they're vital, but there may be some growing pains along the way. And so things like when you have past presidents serving on a board, creating a president's council and asking them to step off the board is painful. And we need to be deeply aware of that. And that's going to be much harder for us to do than it is for young leaders. What our job is as the older leaders is to make sure that it's done with love, with compassion, with kavod, with respect, with all of that. We need to have those younger voices to help us, though, approach those pain points and not be afraid of them. We need to be able to challenge the status quo, I think.
I think that's a really good point. I feel like a lot of the times that adage of we've always done it this way, but if it's no longer working this way, then it needs to be changed, even if it hurts.
So I'll tell you something. We have a young woman here in our shul. By the way, I'm just so everyone knows, I'm not the rabbi of this shul. I'm a rabbi here. I run the educational programs. So I get to talk about the shul. I don't have to worry about the ramifications. So we have a young lady here who is a member of our board. Her daughter graduated from our preschool a couple of years ago. She now comes to our supplementary program. She's on our board. She also is paid as our marketing person. She has a marketing company, and I don't have an idea what we pay her. It's probably $20,000 a year, very part-time, to do some marketing work for us. As much as I love her, she consistently has let us down in a number of different places. And we have been talking for 3 years about making a change, but none of us have the chutzpah to actually do it. Because we're all afraid that we're going to anger her, that we're going to upset her, that we're going to this, that. The bottom line is, I actually think she'll be fine. I don't think she'll care, but bottom line is, it's not working. And so just today, I was sitting in a meeting and I was mentioning that on our calendar, the big event that's starting Friday night, our website calendar, the big event that's coming Friday night is not on our website calendar. In fact, I went on the website to try and find the link. It's nowhere to be found. And I brought it up at a staff meeting. And the rabbi said, yeah, we need to figure that out. I said, okay, good. As long as we're going to start figuring that out now. 3 years. Look, I know that we Jews are the ever-dying people. I'm not naive to the fact that we always think we're dying, and we never do. And I'm not suggesting that anyone is at risk here of dying, but a lot of our synagogues are going to, and institutions are going to become irrelevant unless we take these challenges seriously, unless we stop fiddling around the edges and start taking the risks, the thoughtful, sacred risks that are necessary, and ask the big questions. You know, when it comes to some of these young leaders, I have a feeling that they're going to find ways to solve these problems and complete tasks more efficiently and with better quality than we ever could. They want to serve this larger purpose. They want to make a difference, and they're committed in doing so, I think. But again, I just as a reminder, they're driven by goals. They're not interested in, I think, in the sort of this amorphous idea of we're going to build a community together. They're always assessing their values and goals. The older and more senior leaders may tend to be less driven, but they have that history and the experience that, when paired with that drive and that continual assessment, can do magical things. So what does this all mean? And I really, the question that, Moshe, that you asked about like 3 years ago about why aren't they doing anything about it? We're coming to, I promise. But I just wanted to pause also by saying that I think we also, and this is going to be another pain point and another challenge for us, is that we have to acknowledge that things are not going to be done the same way that they've always been done. And we have to be okay with that. This means that different priorities are going to rise to the top, and that has to be okay. It means that young leaders are going to create the kind of community that best fits their values and their needs, and that has to be okay. Did any of you read Rabbi Kariolitsky's book, Playlist Judaism? Do any of you remember that book? So this was a book, it came out in 2013, I think, maybe. Really, really good book. I don't think it got a lot of attention, but I loved it. So here's his essential argument, as I understand it. His essential argument is, many of us older folks, I'll speak of myself. When I was growing up, if I wanted to hear a song, I had to buy the whole album. Or at the very least, I had to buy a 45. But even a 45 came with a B-side. Dustin, a 45 was a small record that had 2 sides on it. Even a 45 came with a B-side.
For the record, I've watched Universal monster films. I'm well aware of.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I'm
Thank
not.
you. So then when I was in, I guess, was it college maybe? Maybe, no, before college, high school, I guess, high school, college. That's when we had cassette tapes and we could make a mix. We could finally make a mix, but it was a pain. You had to have one of those stereos with the 2 side-by-side tape recorder things, and right?
The
Young
boom
adults
boxes.
today, what do you say?
The boom boxes with the dual
Boom
cassettes.
boxes. Right. Young adults today have not grown up with any of that. They have grown up with the idea of a playlist. They pick the songs they like, they add them to a playlist, and then they listen to those songs over and over again. They are the producers that determine which tracks make the cut. And so in this book, Playlist Judaism, he basically argues that we have to create structures that allow young Jews to craft their own Jewish playlists, their own playlists of Jewish experiences, rather than expecting them to buy into full albums with tracks that they may not appreciate or want to even listen to, right? Join our synagogue and you'll get this and this and this and this. But I don't want to buy all of those. I want to build a playlist. I'd like a little of this and a little of this. And what we've done, by the way, and I've done this too, is we've argued that that's consumerist. They want to just pick and choose. No, they're building a playlist. They're doing what we have trained them to do throughout their lives, to curate those things that are most important to them and to build something that is that they want to listen to. And this is, now we're getting back to why do they not do anything about the complaining? I think they don't do anything about the complaining because they're not really complaining. If they were really complaining, if they really cared about it, let me say this differently. The only thing that you really complain about deeply, meaningfully, is something that is yours. Something that you've had a hand in creating, something that you have a sense of ownership over. If it's not yours, if it's someone, I don't really care. I mean, okay, it bugs me. You're doing it wrong. If I walk into someone else's house, I have a thing about dishwashers. Every night when I get home, I live an hour from my office. So when I leave my office tonight, I have an hour drive home. I'll get home. The first thing I'll do is go rearrange the dishwasher, because my wife, God bless her, does not know how to put dishes in a dishwasher. She just doesn't. She's got crap all over the place. It's ridiculous. If I walk into someone else's house and their dishwasher is out of order, I'm not going to go fix it because I don't really care, because it's not mine. It's not mine. I have no ownership over it. These young folks and older folks come in, and yes, things bother them. They don't like this. They don't like that. They're trying to find a way. It's almost like children, right? When they don't know how to, they don't have the words to communicate, I want to play with you. What do? They'll hit the child or they'll pull their hair. They're not trying to be mean. They're trying to get the attention, and they don't know how to. And so these young folks, they're trying to say, let me in, but they don't really know how to. But I would stand by this next statement. If they came with a complaint about the way something that they had some ownership over was being played out, was being run, was being executed, I'd be willing to bet that they'd put the time in to fix it. What they're not willing to put the time in to fix is something that they have no ownership over. And so I want to suggest that playlist Judaism isn't the end game, that there's actually something else that we need. I want to argue that we need something that I call open source Judaism. Now, I love technology, but I'm not into software and all of that. I don't understand software. My brother does. But the term open source refers to something that people can modify and share because its design, the fundamentals, are publicly accessible. It comes out of software development, and it designates a specific approach to creating computer programs. But of course, we can use it for other things also. It's not just for computer programs. Open source projects, products, initiatives, these all embrace 5 fundamental principles. Number 1 is transparency. Whether we're developing software, solving a business problem, or sustaining and growing our community, we all have to have access to the information and the materials necessary for doing our best work. When these materials are accessible, that's when we can build upon each other's ideas and discoveries, and we can make collectively more effective decisions. Next is collaboration. When we're free to participate, we can build on each other's work in ways that are completely unanticipated. And I can modify what you've shared, you can modify what I've shared, and we can unlock new possibilities that you or I couldn't even have conceived of. When we work together, we can solve problems that no one can solve alone. And when we implement these open standards, when we build open source Judaism, it's not just open source for us, it's built, the fundamental pillars of it, the structure is open source for the future generations to build their own version of their Jewish identity, their Jewish engagement. Iterate early and often. If it's broke, fix it. The opposite of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's broke, fix it. Rapid prototypes, rapid discoveries. An iterative approach leads to better solutions faster. We need to feel free to experiment. Moshe, you were talking about the board before, and I don't want to suggest this is every synagogue or every board's experience, but I just want to share with you one experience that I've had with a board, which gets directly in the way of this idea of iterate early and often. So our board here, we actually have a lovely board. There's no toxicity. It's really good people doing really good work. We're just not really going anywhere. But here's the problem. We have lots of teams. We don't have committees, we have teams. Every single one of our teams, they can talk, they can discuss, they can even make decisions. But all of those decisions have to go to the board. Nothing can actually happen until the board signs off on it. That right there stifles innovation. That says to our leaders who are not maybe at the board level, we don't really trust you. That's the pat on the head. You can talk about it. Thank you for talking about it. We need to be bold and give our leaders the ownership and the power that they need to learn by doing. 2 more. Inclusive meritocracy. Good ideas can and should come from anywhere, and the best ideas should win. Only by including, and this only works when we include diverse perspectives. This is why it's so important that we have young and young at heart leaders in our leadership. Because without those conversations, we will never be able to be certain that we've identified the best ideas. So we don't have to operate by consensus, but we do have to make sure that we have systems that help us determine which projects gather support and effort from the community. And finally, community. What is our purpose? What are our values? These are the things that make open source so powerful. It's not the product that matters. It's what's underneath it. It's the values, the community goals supersede any individual's interests or agenda. Last thing I want to share with you, and then we can just open it up. What do we do? How do we do this? Right? Great ideas. Oh, wonderful, beautiful. How do we create open source Judaism? How do we bring these young folks in? Well, I'm going to argue that we do it in the same exact way that an open source app, an open source website or program is developed, through an SDK. So what is an SDK? An SDK is a software development toolkit. It's a set of software tools and programs that are provided by hardware and software vendors that developers can use to build applications for specific platforms. These providers make their SDKs available, and it helps the developers easily integrate their apps with this. So for example, Apple has an SDK for their iPhone, and that's how all those apps on the App Store are built. And Google has an SDK for Android, right? So they have all these different software development kits. But we're not building an app, we're building a community. And so our SDK is a synagogue development kit. We need to build synagogue development kits, SDKs, which contain the tools that are going to help our community members build their own Jewish experiences and identities on our platform. And vitally, I think it will also inspire our community members to step up, to feel a sense of ownership and responsibility, and become the leaders that we need to develop Jewish community and engagement. Now, one word of caution. I think that we Jews made a terrible mistake about 40 years ago, maybe now 50 years ago, when we said to young moms and dads, don't worry about educating your children. We'll take care of that for you. Just bring them to religious school. Oh, don't worry about building a sukkah. We have one at the shul. Come to the synagogue sukkah. Don't worry about a Passover Seder. We have one of the, we said for lots of, don't worry about davening. Don't worry. Come here, do it here. Instead of building a platform upon which people could create their own Jewish experiences and identities, we stole from lots of Jews any sense of obligation that they may have to live Jewishly. This is something I was thinking about this when Moshe was talking earlier, that the Orthodox world has, in measure, that liberal communities don't have at all, really, and that is a sense of obligation. Liberal people have no sense of obligation, and it's a shanda. It really is. It's a terrible, terrible shame that we've lost that. In the Orthodox world, some communities, depends on the community, of course, they have a little bit of that. But this idea that we have a responsibility to teach Judaism to our children, to live Judaism at home, we kind of took that away from Jews when we said, don't worry, we'll do it. Now we did it, that we said that because that's where we got our shekels. That's what paid the rabbis and the cantors and built the huge buildings and created the capital funds and all that. All those kids that were coming into religious school and going through bar bat mitzvah. Bar bat mitzvah is a whole other thing that we could have a talk about. So the word of warning is, what we're not doing, we need to stop creating programs, essentially, is what I'm arguing. Stop making programs. Stop programming everything. We all need to stop. Stop. Instead, create an SDK, create a platform, give your congregants the tools to do the programming. Instead of building a sukkah at your shul, get a team together that will go around to people's homes and build Sukkot with them at their homes. Some of you probably already do this. I did this for years. This was back when, what was that show where they move that bus? Remember, they did the Extreme Makeover Home Edition, right? So we did Extreme Makeover Sukkah Edition. For $80, you could get all the wood and the lattice work that you needed from Home Depot. So I went and I bought, 10 sets of this. We rented a truck. We didn't even rent a truck, actually, now that I think of it. A congregant had a truck. I got a team of people to come with me. We drove around on the Sunday before Sukkot, and we gave them these Sukkot for free. We gave them instructions. They helped us build it. They helped us decorate it. We gave them instructions on how to take it down and store it. And the only thing they had to do was at some point during the week, invite 2 other families over to eat their sukkah. That was it. We didn't even build a sukkah at Shul that year. Instead of creating the program, we gave a few of our congregants the tools to do their own. And because of that, because of that experience, the folks who were building and the folks that we were building for, they made a connection, because that's what they were spending 2 hours together on a Sunday morning building a sukkah. There's a shidduch that was made right there. We know that younger voices are going to enrich our communities. We know that they're going to bring enthusiasm, diverse perspectives, value-driven focus to our communities. We know that it isn't enough to just invite new leaders in. We have to make space for them. We have to cultivate structures that are going to allow them to create their own Jewish experiences, their own Jewish communities that may look different than ours. And we know that in doing so, we're going to have to do some TzimTzum, some withdrawal, so that they can create the communities that are going to serve the next generation. I want to stop and invite you to reflect with me a little bit on some of what we've shared. And then I really want to hear where your communities are in your thinking about this. What resonated with you? Where do you think I'm completely wrong? What are some of your thoughts about some of what I shared? I really want to hear. You can either just unmute or whatever feels right.
I have a question first. When you were speaking about open source Judaism, one of the things that you said is transparency, access to materials. Can you go a little bit deeper? I'm not clear on what that actually means.
Yeah. So I think there are two pieces to that. I think one is transparency around Torah, and the other is transparency around the temple. So let's do the temple first. I don't think most congregants know how the synagogue sausage is made. Kosher, but synagogue sausage. I don't think most of them know. I don't think most of them care about knowing. I think that we have a responsibility to make sure, though, that our budgets, that clergy salaries, that the way that the synagogue is run, the constitution of the synagogue, the mission, the vision, the values, that all those things are readily accessible. So I was once critiqued for, what did they say? Incessantly vomiting on stage. I was giving a sermon. They said I talk too much, basically. I like to just have all the information out there. I'll give you an example. So I'm going to just bring something up to show you, because this is, if you go to, so one of the things I do here is I run a preschool. If you go to most synagogue websites or day school websites, things like that, it's really hard to find out how much it's going to cost to send your kid there. It's really challenging. I don't think it should be challenging. I think it should be really, really honest. And so I have a page on my website that tells you exactly how much you're going to have to pay. Transparency. It's right here. You want to know how that money is going to be spent? There you go. 79.2% goes to salaries and wages. We need to be fully transparent in how our synagogues, our communities function and work. And then the second piece, or the first piece really, is transparent about Torah. And maybe this is trickier because I think, look, Torah is Torah, and no two people understand it or relate to it in the same way. But each community does have its own way of living Torah. And it's important for every community for every member of the community to have access to, this is how we interpret, this is how we live, this is how we embody Torah. We have a discussion right now, which it's a discussion about kashrut in our community, that there is a group of I think young adults who are questioning our kashrut policy. I'm not going to go into the specifics, but they're questioning the kashrut policy. This is wonderful. This is fantastic, because now we have an opportunity to actually look at the kashrut policy, to open it up, to study it together, and to decide together whether this is still, I'm sure this policy was written at least 5 years ago. is this still the right policy for us from a halachic perspective, from a Jewish practice perspective? So that's how I understand the transparency piece, both in the sort of the sausage of it, and also in a more spiritual, Torah-minded way. I hope that makes some sense.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
more clear. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Of course. What are the thoughts, insights? What did I really blow it? Come on, Moshe, come on. I know you disagree with me about something.
Isn't that the whole point of this?
Yes. No, that's why I'm asking. Absolutely. It's the whole point of this.
So we've tried some of the things you recommended. I'm not sure how well they work. I think that works well if someone's not engaged. I think the problem is if someone's misengaged or misaligned. And again, no, you're talking about alignments of the shul's goal versus the person's goal. And, for good or bad in our synagogue, it's pretty clear what our alignments are and what we have whatever on. And again, every denomination, as you can appreciate, looks at this a little bit differently. There are people and I've been going to SLI programs for probably 10 or 12 years. And you hear the same things from different people using different words. I mean, it's to say everyone has the same issues using slightly different examples, different words. One of our problems we've always had is people come to Minyan. That's not really a problem. Is do they actually support the shul? People look at in the Orthodox world, the shul is a place to daven. So we have minyanim, and anything outside minyanim we don't care about. But they also don't feel they have to support the rest of it, forgetting that the major expense in a shul is number one, the building, and number two, the rabbi. Those are the two things you need to have in Minyan. Well, technically not. You need a backyard and 10 people, but
right. Wait, that's really important what you just did. Like, that's really super important. Right?
I rented my backyard for 2 years to the shul. It was a great.
Well, yeah, kind of. But look, I don't know about your shul, and I certainly don't want to suppose to know. And by the way, I want to hear more about you said misaligned. That's an interesting term. I want to hear how you think some of your people are misaligned. But I just want to say that a lot of you, not as many in the Orthodox world, but some even in the Orthodox world, are going to approach a synagogue and say, why do I need to pay $3,000 a year for this building and this rabbi? I don't need it. I sure as heck don't need any of this to become a bar bat mitzvah. Now, that doesn't mean we throw away the building. It doesn't mean we fire the rabbi. It just means that we have to be open to hearing. We have to find a way for those voices to be meaningful in our creation of what comes next. I'm sorry, Moshe, go ahead.
No, correct. But if you think of Judaism, you take a step back, what is Judaism? It's a community, correct? Because again, you're right. I can find 9 neighbors, have a minyan in my backyard. We've had a minyan on our block for a decade for Marv on Saturday night. Diverse group. Again, the one thing that we have in common is we all pay tax for the same block in the city, nothing more. But the purpose of a shul, at least in my opinion, and again, this is where misalignment is a sense of community. You're trying to do things for everyone. And again, like one reason I chose my shul 15 years ago when I moved into town was it was a shul with everything, older, younger, this or that, or from or not as from, speakers from, super rabbi to super secular and anything in between. And, I enjoyed the fact that they had all this, knowing that I'm not ever going to go to all those things, whatever those things are. I can sort of throw my dart where I want to be and it's going to have it there. Generationally, what I've seen, being on the board for several years is that certain generational things they have a singular focus on things. If it affects them, then we should be doing. If it doesn't affect them, they don't understand the sense of community. And again, a shul can't live by any one group. I mean, shuls that have one note do very good for that one note until that one note moves, dies out, etc. I mean, I don't want to give any examples just because I don't know where everyone here is from, but I know of a shul in northern New Jersey who had a great kehillah for about 20 years. They never wanted to change anything. And again, they were very happy. And then enough people move out of that town who check that note, and all of a sudden the shul's having problems finding an identity and yada, yada. Now that could work for you, great. But, I mean, it's funny when we say we're the out-of-town shul in Teaneck, New Jersey, which is hard. I mean, Teaneck, I think we have 25, 30 shuls. I know there are a lot of them. Federation can give you a better number than I can. But, and you could probably find any flavor of what you're looking for, which is really nice. Growing up in towns where you have one shul and you're happy you have a minyan and you didn't really care if the person drove to shul or walked to shul. If the person's over 13 and male, you'd count them for the minyan and you're very happy to do that. You sort of get to a point where you need people to still understand the big picture of what they're doing. It's okay to be hyper focused on something that you feel is important. If you feel youth groups are important or teen youth is important or a men's club, a sister, a kid, you can find what you feel is important, but you still understand it has to work within the confines of a bigger group or it doesn't work. Because otherwise you just have no you and your club. And again, throw the tent in your backyard and you're fine. That's not Judaism. That's not community, in my opinion.
Right. And so Judaism being so community centric is butting heads with this uber individualized world that we're now living in, where everybody is their own master, where people don't feel a sense of obligation to their community. They don't even necessarily see the real value in physical community because, I've got 3,000 friends on Facebook, or I'm not diminishing that because that's real also, but in some ways, what we stand for is a bit of an antiquated idea. Not an idea that doesn't have value, not an idea that we shouldn't continually push for. But for a lot of young folks, it is a hard sell. It's a hard sell. And what we need to do, I think, is at the very least, we have to be honest about that it's one thing to we have to ask the question, are we selling people something that they are going to want to buy? And if not, why? How can we market it differently? How can we package it differently? How can we bring them into the process of creating what we're selling? I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but we have to start asking fundamental questions because the reality is not matching with our vision of what it should be, I think. Yeah, Dustin, go ahead, sorry.
One thing you talked about that made me think of a couple of things was when you're talking about like helping out with the sukkahs in different locations instead of the shul. Because, I've been very fortunate. I've been to many shuls and many synagogues, and they're all beautiful, wonderful, and fantastic. And I would not speak against that. But, I would say the last number of years, we've done a sukkah at my sister's place. It's always quite an adventure to build it and not kill someone, admittedly. But, if I knew that, the local rabbi or, a couple of synagogues, are offering, hey, we'll help you build it. We'll help you, find the materials, yada, yada, yada. Because there are certain pieces that are harder to find than others without costing an arm and a leg. That would certainly give more of an incentive for me to say, hey, you helped us, why don't you come over? We'll all sing the sukkah together. Like, I would say some of the best Jewish experiences have been not necessarily the sukkah, but, being at someone's houses or being invited to this event. And obviously we could have a whole conversation about, Hanukkah coming up and, the menorah lightings that are publicly done and things like, I think there's definitely an appeal of, as you said, the playlist for younger people, does it cross off X, Y, and Z? But also just that more individualized communal feeling, because when you go into a synagogue, depending on, of course, your observance level and how often you go, you could be in a room full of people, but you could still feel completely isolated. And if anything, it makes you feel more so when you're not part of that group, whether it's the group that gives the most money, whether it's the group that, always has that seating in a certain area, that if you sit in that spot, you're going to get hell for it. I think that there is that challenge of the balance. But like that was something that resonated with me. And I know a few shuls that probably would do it and others that wouldn't do it. But it was interesting. And I'd be curious, especially with, what happened during COVID with Zoom and kind of having that interpersonal, how certain synagogues might adjust in the future due to it. So
I think it's interesting because I think that what you were saying earlier about saying that a principal or a rabbi is how you do Judaism, to give us your kids, we'll deal with it, we'll teach them, all of that. During COVID, that wasn't really an option anymore. And we saw so much of the Zoom classes, and I went to Zoom seminary with like teachers from Israel, and I was taking classes while working like on my lunch break, and it was amazing. I grew up at a Reform shul in our area that did a little bit more for bar and bat mitzvah than other places. And I now have a 9-year-old son, and I had no idea that it wasn't a prerequisite to do all of those prayers and still be bar or bat mitzvah. And obviously now I'm a little bit more religious and in a very different place in my life. And I had no idea. And I think that that's part and parcel of that movement, and even the synagogue particularly failing their membership in that way of being able to say, like you said, it's about community and about learning Torah and how you do it. And when you learn about Torah and the ways that it's been done for centuries, that like you learn that everybody is responsible for each other, especially our group and Jews as a whole.
Right. I'll never forget that we lived in Massachusetts and my wife taught at the Orthodox Jewish Day School up there. I was at a conservative synagogue and she had major surgery one year. And for 2 weeks, every day on our front porch, there was one of those old white cooler things, that would break apart, styrofoam type things, filled with meals every single day. No one ever knocked on our door. We never knew who brought it. I mean, I knew who brought it. It was from her Orthodox. It was from the Young Israel where she taught. There was no question. This is just what you do. That doesn't happen in the conservative reform world by and large.
Well, and it only does if you're part of that group, either the
mitzvah
group,
team, the
yes,
chesed committee,
or you have friends that have become like family that do it for you, but it's not because it's the thing you do, or that it's the right thing to do.
And we all want that feeling. We all want our communities to have that feeling of, but again, I think that comes with the sense of or lack of a sense of obligation. I also want to just say about the pandemic, we realized very quickly how screwed we were when the pandemic hit, because our parents had no clue what to do. They could not help their kids at all. It was like me trying to help my 14-year-old with their math homework. I mean, our parents were completely lost when they couldn't send their kids to religious school. And we know that because now that the kids are back, we're seeing them. That what happened to our children in their Jewish education mirrors what happened to our children in secular education and socialization and everything else. Secular education, I don't expect parents to be able to teach their kids math and science. We do, as a community, expect our parents to be able to pass on Jewish values, but they couldn't even do that. And that's on us. That really is on us. Which is why, again, I keep going back to this idea of we have to start thinking platforms instead of products, building platforms instead of products. I'm sorry, Cheryl, did you want to jump in?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment in terms of the pandemic, in terms of teaching our children the things that they needed to learn about their Judaism. My kids are older, but parents were so stressed from working at home and having their kids on Zoom and having to figure out all the other stuff. That Judaism part I could see would be out the window for those that are not Orthodox, because there just wasn't enough bandwidth to deal with everything that everybody was dealing with. So,
and I think that's,
and you know what my thought is, as soon as you said that, you made me thought, what they need? They need Shabbos.
Yeah.
You know what they need? The very thing they need is some of this Jewish stuff.
Right.
That could have helped, you're right. Of course you're right. I agree with you 100%. And I think that look, we make time for the things that are important to us. I make time every day to put food in my body. I have not missed it, except for Yom Kippur and an occasional other fast. I have not missed a day yet because it's important to me. This thing that we tell ourselves, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, it's bubkiss. You do have the time and the energy. You're not making the time and you're not taking the energy and you're not making you're not giving the energy and making the time. Let's just be honest. Come on, folks. We have time to exercise. We're choosing not to. It's okay. Let's own it, right? The same thing is true with Jewish learning, and so parents who will say, I'm too busy. You're not too busy. You're choosing not to, and that's okay. I love you anyway. But let's just be honest with one another, and let's talk about how can we find what is the angle in? What can I give you? How can I support you? How can I?
Well, maybe they're not even knowledgeable enough to actually do it. So
Right. So that the other, okay. So number one, maybe they're not knowledgeable enough to do it. Absolutely. I want to take that a step farther though, Cheryl, and say that a lot of times we say that these young, in fact, someone just said this to me the other day, these young folks are like the She'ena Yodei Lishol. They're the fourth child on Pesach. They don't even know what to ask. They don't even know what they want.
Mhm.
I'm going to call Bubkus on that also. They do know what they want. They may not know how to call it in Jewish vocabulary, or they may not express it in the same way that you or I would, but they know what they want. These aren't stupid people. They know they want connection. They want spirituality. They want the same things that we want. I think to me, that's instead of saying, I truly don't know how to reach them, we're saying it's their fault. They don't know what they want. I truly don't know how to reach them. And again, that's okay. Jewish communities, I really believe, have to start being much more raw and honest and naked, exposed, open source, so that we can finally begin the painful, somewhat painful process of changing, of growing, of recreating ourselves, of rededicating ourselves to those core values that make up the platform. Cheryl, did you want to jump in? I'm sorry.
We have an interesting issue in our synagogue, which is the modern Orthodox synagogue, and it is very welcoming and it is very inclusive. And certainly a lot of the lay leadership is younger, which is fine. My co-president was a younger family. We worked together, and I think we worked very well together. Our issue is when you talk about open source Judaism, our synagogue is becoming something of a social Judaism synagogue, which is we're very into community and we're very into meal trains and we had a flood at the shul recently and we put out a WhatsApp and so many people came to help. We do all of that. What we don't do is the prayer part of it. And we struggle every day to get minions. And there's the only area where we saw sort of a divide fundamentally in the older group and the younger group. Whereas the older group, my generation, sort of felt it was a responsibility or a community responsibility to go to Minyan and to make a Minyan and all that stuff. Many of the younger family who's moved in, who, mind you, are day school educated. It's not like they have no idea. They don't. They choose not to go, or they go to work, or they're home with their kids. And that's where we see a huge divide. Most of the Minyans, I would say 13 out of 14 a week, are primarily older people. And,
Yeah.
and we have prayer services, early enough that people could go to work. So it's not they're at work thing.
Sure, but they can't get their kids up and help with the packing the lunches and
Right.
I mean, there's always going to be an excuse. You're absolutely right. That is a fascinating and wonderful challenge to be in. I remember.
I don't think our rabbi would agree with you.
Fair enough. I remember years ago we had an evening minyan. We didn't have a morning minyan. We had an evening minyan, and we also, whenever there was, God forbid, a death in the community, we would do a shiva minyan at the person's home. Obviously, well, we reached a point in our, and remember, we were not Orthodox, we were conservative. We reached a point where we were really struggling to maintain both a minyan at shul and a minyan at the shiva house. And so I made the suggestion, well, since this person's a part of our community, let's not daven at shul. Let's just all go to the shiva house. And they all said, no, absolutely not. I don't know that person. It's very uncomfortable to have to walk into a house of someone who's mourning. I don't know what to say. There are a million different excuses for why, we don't make a minyan. I think that my first thought when you said that you have trouble, with the young people davening is the davening speaking to them? Now I am
Probably not, but
right.
I don't think it spoke to my generation either.
Okay. But we put up with that because we felt an obligation, which again, these younger generations generally feel less than we do. We felt a sense of obligation to the community. I have to help make a minyan. It wasn't even so much that I have to fulfill my chiyuv. I have to fulfill my own obligation to daven in a minyan. I have a responsibility to help make a minyan for the sake of the community. I think a lot of young folks just don't have that same sense of responsibility today. And so while I fully understand that there are many more limitations in an Orthodox setting as to what you can do with tefillah, I also firmly believe that there's a lot of creativity that can be infused into the tefillah experience, whether it's on Shabbos or not. And I would maybe ask the question, why aren't they coming? Is it simply that they don't feel responsible, that they don't have the time, or are we not offering something that is really drawing them in? I think we have to sort of diagnose what's at the core here. It's a fascinating challenge and a real one. I hear you. Sorry, Dustin, go ahead. You want to jump in?
No, I was just checking, just doing a time check.
Yeah, it's 8:30. Yeah, I know. I don't want to keep you all too late. Such fascinating challenges and questions, though. So again, if there's one thing that you take from tonight, I hope it's, can we please start asking serious questions? Can we please start opening ourselves up to the possibility that I may not have all the right answers, and that I have to do a little TzimTzum, that I have to do a little withdrawal, make a little room for someone who feels very, very differently from me. And in fact, it rubs me the wrong way. But then again, they're creating Judaism for themselves and for the next generation, whereas my job was to create it for myself and for them. I still can be a part of that journey. I still must be a part of that journey, but I can't be the only driver. So.
Makes sense.
Hard to do, makes sense.
No, we're revamping our bylaws and revamping our board as we speak.
That's amazing. Do you have guidance to help you do that? There are some amazing folks out there, both in the Jewish and secular world, that kind of do this kind of work.
Oh, we did the bylaws already. They were approved. And actually, we did have lifetime tenure for all former presidents, and that's been cut back to 10 years past your service.
Really? Interesting.
So,
and then
we do want some people with institutional knowledge.
Oh, sure.
On the board.
Do the presidents who are timed out of the board, do they get to be on some sort of advisory council, or?
So we have to set one of those up, but
we
actually
put them on an
nobody's even
iceberg and
objected.
push them out into the Atlantic.
We'll see. We're creating a new board now. I think some of them think they're going to be on the new board, but we've also instituted a policy where if you're on the new board, you need to be on a committee or somehow involved more than just being a seat on the board.
We have that also, and our challenge here is it goes back to we've told everyone they have to be in a committee. We just haven't empowered the committees to actually do anything. So they go on a committee and then they talk, and then they feel like they've wasted their time because the board has to approve everything.
All right, Dustin, you want to say goodnight?
So so I will in just a few seconds longer. First of all, thank you, Rabbi Paskin, for, of course, speaking with us. I thought this was very informative and a very great discussion. I would like to remind, Barry jumped off, but he very much appreciated, and I will be following up with him. But if anyone is interested, once again, we are very fortunate to have Rabbi Paskin as one of our consultation professional options for the synagogue to apply to. If you liked tonight's discussion topic with Rabbi Paskin and are interested in pursuing that with Rabbi Paskin, please let us know in the application, because that's something obviously we would be happy to organize. Because if you look at the bios for a lot of this information, a lot of it is tech and outreach and communication, which is of course important. But if this is something you would want to continue with Rabbi Paskin based on this conversation, that is something that is very doable. So I just wanted to include that for those who attended this evening. If you have,
and let me just say that if you would like that, what you're going to get from me is being your Ezer Kenegdo. It's being that person who's going to challenge every assumption that you bring, and is going to do it with love. But even 9 times out of 10, you may be right. I'm still going to challenge you, because that sort of chavruta, that back and forth, that's how real learning, I think, and growth happens. So.
And just as a friendly reminder, the deadline for all applications will be this upcoming Monday, December 19th, at the end of business day, or the end of the day, excuse me, for any application. So besides that, I wanted to thank you all for attending this evening. Our next program will not be until until January. So I want to wish you a very happy early Hanukkah. We'll have our official e-blast with a beautiful picture. We got it done very recently. So I know you're excited. I know you're going to open it, but thank you all very much for your time. Hope you have a wonderful evening. If there's anything you want to follow up on after this, you know, my phone number and email is always available. So please.
Yeah, and please reach out if there's anything I can be helpful with. Thank you all so much for sharing this time with me. Honestly, I'm so gratified. I learned so much from all of you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.